I stood in a Boston courtroom, accused of stealing my own inheritance by the parents who abandoned me 15 years ago. My name is Taylor Sullivan, and I'm a 32-year-old attorney. When my millionaire grandfather passed away and left me everything, his entire $12 million estate, my estranged parents showed up out of nowhere. Not to reconcile, not to grieve, but to sue me in open court. They claimed I manipulated him. They called me a fraud. And in front of dozens of witnesses, reporters, and colleagues, my mother looked at me like I was trash she'd scraped off her shoe. But then the judge froze. He stared at me and said, "Wait, you're the defendant?" He had no idea who I really was. What happened next changed everything. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. I learned what it meant to be invisible in my own family when I was 10 years old. It was my birthday. I'd spent the morning setting up decorations in our dining room: balloons, streamers, a homemade banner. My mother walked past me 3 times without saying a word. My father was on the phone in his office, talking about a real estate deal. My older brother, Marcus, was getting ready for his own celebration, a networking dinner my parents were hosting for his college acceptance. No one remembered mine. By 6 o'clock, I sat alone at the kitchen table with a store-bought cupcake. That's when my grandfather walked in. He took one look at me, at the decorations I'd hung myself, and his face fell. "Taylor," he said quietly, sitting down beside me. "Where is everyone?" "They're at Marcus's dinner," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's okay. It's more important." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "No, it's not." My grandfather stayed with me that entire evening. We ate pizza, watched old movies, and he told me stories about building his business from nothing. Before he left, he looked me straight in the eye and said something I'd never forget. "Taylor, you're worth more than they'll ever see. Don't let them define you." I didn't understand it then. But over the years, that pattern repeated itself. Every achievement I earned, honor roll, debate team captain, full scholarship to college, was met with silence from my parents. Meanwhile, Marcus got standing ovations for mediocrity. When I turned 17, I made a decision. I packed a bag, took my savings, and left. I put myself through college and law school working 3 jobs. I didn't ask my parents for a dime, but I never stopped visiting my grandfather. He was the only one who saw me. 7 years later, I graduated from Harvard Law School in the top 10% of my class. I sent my parents an invitation. I shouldn't have expected anything, but some part of me still hoped. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd see that I'd made something of myself without their money, without their name. The ceremony was beautiful. Hundreds of families filled the auditorium, cheering and crying as their children crossed the stage. When they called my name, I walked across that platform alone. I scanned the crowd anyway, searching for familiar faces. My grandfather was there, front row, beaming with pride. He was the only one. 2 days later, I received a text from my mother. Not a congratulations, not even an acknowledgement. "We don't celebrate mediocrity." 4 words, that's all I was worth to her. I showed the message to my grandfather during our weekly lunch. He read it, set down his phone, and shook his head. "I'm sorry," he said. "I raised my son better than this. Or I thought I did." "It's not your fault," I told him. "Maybe not," he said, "but I see what they don't. You did this on your own, Taylor. That's real success. That's what matters." Over the next few years, I built a career at one of Boston's top law firms. I worked on high-profile cases, won trials, earned the respect of partners twice my age. My grandfather came to every milestone: my first case victory, my promotion to senior associate, even just dinner on random Tuesdays. My parents? They called twice in 5 years. Both times, they needed money for Marcus's failing business ventures. I said no both times. My grandfather noticed. He noticed everything, and I think that's when he made his decision. My grandfather died on a Tuesday morning in March. He was 85 years old. I was there. I'd been there every day for the previous 2 weeks, ever since his heart started failing. I held his hand, read him his favorite books, and told him stories about cases I was working on. He smiled even when he couldn't speak. My parents showed up once. They stayed for 20 minutes, spent most of it on their phones, and left without saying goodbye to him. He passed peacefully in his sleep, with me sitting beside him. 1 week later, his attorney, a man named Robert Smith, called a meeting to read the will. I assumed it would be a formality. My grandfather was wealthy, yes, but I figured he'd split everything between my father and me, maybe set up a trust. I was wrong. Robert sat across from me in his office, my parents on one side, me on the other. He opened the folder and began reading. To my granddaughter, Taylor Sullivan, the only person in this family who loved me for who I am, not what I have, I leave the entirety of my estate. The room went silent. Robert continued. This includes all real estate holdings, investment portfolios, and liquid assets, totaling approximately $12 million. My mother's face went white. My father leaned forward, his jaw tight. There must be a mistake, my father said. There's no mistake, Robert replied calmly. Mr. Sullivan was very clear. He drafted this will a year ago with full mental capacity. He left explicit instructions. He slid a document across the table. At the bottom, in my grandfather's handwriting, was a single line. They never came when I needed them. Taylor did. 2 days later, my parents showed up at my door for the first time in 15 years. They didn't knock. They rang the doorbell 3 times in rapid succession, like they owned the place. When I opened the door, my mother pushed past me without a word. My father followed, his face set in that expression I remembered from childhood, the one that said he was about to tell me how things were going to be. We need to talk, my father said, standing in my living room like he belonged there. About what? I asked, though I already knew. About the will, my mother said, turning to face me. About this ridiculous situation your grandfather created. I closed the door slowly. The will is legal, it's done. It's not done, my father said. That money belongs to the family. You have no right to keep it all. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, not hurt, just a kind of tired clarity. I have every right, I said. Grandfather left it to me. It was his choice. He was 85 years old, my mother snapped. He was confused. You manipulated him. I visited him every week for 15 years, I said evenly. Where were you? My father stepped closer. Watch your tone. We're still your parents. Are you? The words came out before I could stop them. Because parents don't abandon their children. Parents don't show up after 15 years demanding money. We're not demanding, my mother said, though her voice said otherwise. We're asking you to do the right thing. Share it. It's what family does. I looked at them both. These people who'd made me feel worthless my entire childhood, who'd chosen my brother over me at every turn, who'd ignored every achievement I'd earned. The will is legal, I repeated. If you have a problem with it, take it to court. My father's eyes narrowed. We will, and we'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. 1 week later, a process server knocked on my office door. I was in the middle of reviewing depositions for a corporate case when he handed me the envelope. The moment I saw the law firm's name on the letterhead, I knew. My parents were suing me. The complaint was 30 pages long. They accused me of undue influence, elder manipulation, and fraudulent misrepresentation. They claimed my grandfather had been mentally incompetent when he drafted the will. They demanded the court void the entire document and distribute the estate according to intestate succession laws, which would give my father everything. I sat there reading it, feeling my hands go numb. My colleague, Jennifer, knocked and stepped into my office. You okay? You look pale. I handed her the complaint without a word. She read the first page, then looked up at me with wide eyes. "Taylor, this is baseless," I said. "I know." "But they're playing dirty," she said, flipping through the pages. "They've already leaked this to the press. Look." She pulled up her phone and showed me a news article. The headline read, "Estranged daughter accused of stealing family fortune." My stomach dropped. The article painted me as a gold digger who'd swooped in during my grandfather's final days to steal what rightfully belonged to my father. The comments section was worse. Strangers who'd never met me were calling me a vulture, a thief, a manipulator. "This is character assassination," Jennifer said quietly. "It's strategy," I replied. "They want to destroy my reputation before we even get to court." She set down her phone. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the complaint again, at my parents' signatures at the bottom, and felt something harden inside me. "I'm going to fight back," I said. "Not just for the money, for my name." I hired Jennifer as my attorney the next day. We spent 2 weeks building our defense in a conference room that became our war room. Documents covered every surface: medical records, bank statements, correspondence, witness lists. "Your grandfather was thorough," Jennifer said, holding up a folder. "He knew someone might challenge this." She showed me the medical records. My grandfather had undergone a full cognitive assessment 3 months before drafting the will. The neurologist's report was clear. Patient demonstrates full mental capacity, excellent memory, and sound judgment. "That destroys their incompetency argument," I said. "It gets better," Jennifer replied. She pulled out another folder. "Your grandfather recorded a video." My breath caught. "A video?" "He made it a year before he died. Sat down with his attorney and explained on camera exactly why he was leaving everything to you." She looked at me carefully. "Have you seen it?" I shook my head. "Do you want to?" Part of me did. Part of me was terrified. But I nodded. Jennifer pulled up the video on her laptop. My grandfather appeared on screen, sitting in Robert Smith's office, looking directly at the camera. He was thin but alert, his eyes clear. "My name is William Sullivan," he began. "I'm making this video to explain my decision." I watched the entire thing. By the end, tears were streaming down my face. "This is your ace," Jennifer said quietly. "But we'll save it for the right moment." I wiped my eyes and nodded. "When?" "When they've committed to their narrative, when they've told the court you manipulated him, then we show them the truth." I took a deep breath. Walking into that courtroom would be the hardest thing I'd ever done. But I wasn't going to back down. I had the truth on my side. That was all I needed. The morning of the trial, I stood outside Boston's Superior Court and tried to steady my breathing. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. Cameras flashed as I walked past. Someone shouted, "Ms. Sullivan, did you manipulate your grandfather?" I kept my head up and didn't answer. Jennifer walked beside me, her hand on my arm. "Don't engage," she murmured. "Let the evidence speak." Inside, the courtroom was packed. I recognized faces from my law firm in the gallery, colleagues I'd worked with for years. Some looked supportive. Others looked curious, like they were watching a spectacle. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table with their attorney, a silver-haired man named Gerald Harris. My mother wore an expensive navy suit. My father sat rigid, his expression cold. Neither of them looked at me. I took my seat at the defense table and arranged my files with shaking hands. "All rise." Judge Michael Brennan entered the courtroom. I'd known he was assigned to the case, but seeing him in person made everything real. He was in his early 60s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. I'd worked with him years ago when he was still a partner at Morrison and Webb. He'd mentored me on a complex contract dispute. He settled into his chair and picked up the case file. Then he looked up at the parties. His gaze landed on me. His eyes widened, just slightly, but I saw it. "Ms. Sullivan," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "You're the defendant in this matter?" The entire courtroom went silent. I stood. "Yes, Your Honor." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. He knew me. He knew my work, and he was trying to reconcile the attorney he'd mentored with the person being accused of elder fraud. "I see," he said finally. "Let's proceed." Gerald Harris stood and buttoned his suit jacket. He was the kind of attorney who commanded a room, polished, confident, and expensive. "Your Honor," he began, "my clients, Richard and Margaret Sullivan, are here today because of a grave injustice. Their father, William Sullivan, was a man of considerable wealth and sound mind for most of his life, but in his final years he became vulnerable." He paused for effect, letting the word hang in the air. The defendant, Taylor Sullivan, isolated Mr. Sullivan from his family. She manipulated him emotionally and psychologically, and when he was at his weakest, she convinced him to disinherit his own son in favor of her. I felt Jennifer's hand on my arm, a silent reminder to stay calm. Harris walked to his table and picked up a document. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A letter written by Mr. Sullivan 6 months before his death." He handed copies to the judge and to Jennifer. I leaned over to read it. The letter was handwritten, shaky, and brief. "I feel pressured. I don't know what to do anymore." My stomach tightened. The handwriting looked similar to my grandfather's, but something was off. The loops were wrong. The spacing was inconsistent. "This letter," Harris continued, "shows that Mr. Sullivan was under duress. He was being coerced." Judge Brennan studied the letter carefully. "Do you have authentication for this document?" "We're working on that, Your Honor," Harris said smoothly, "but the emotional content speaks for itself." Then my mother stood up. "Your Honor, if I may," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "My daughter never cared about my father. She only showed up when she knew he was dying and had money to leave behind." The courtroom murmured. I felt dozens of eyes on me. Judge Brennan raised his hand. "Mrs. Sullivan, please sit down. You'll have your opportunity to testify." But the damage was done. The narrative was set. Jennifer rose immediately. "Your Honor, that letter is a forgery," she said, her voice clear and firm. "We have a handwriting expert prepared to testify that it does not match Mr. William Sullivan's authenticated writing samples." Harris frowned. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious case," Jennifer replied. She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's entire argument rests on the claim that Mr. Sullivan was incompetent or under duress. But the facts tell a different story." She walked to our table and picked up a folder. "Ms. Taylor Sullivan visited her grandfather every single week for 15 years. She was present at family gatherings, holidays, and hospital visits. Meanwhile, Mr. Richard Sullivan and Mrs. Margaret Sullivan contacted William Sullivan primarily when they needed financial assistance." "Objection," Harris said. "Speculation." "It's documented," Jennifer shot back. She held up phone records. "These records show the frequency and duration of calls between the parties. The pattern is clear." Judge Brennan gestured for the records. "I'll review these," Jennifer continued. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have medical documentation proving that Mr. Sullivan was fully competent when he drafted his will. He underwent a comprehensive cognitive evaluation specifically to prevent this kind of challenge." I watched the judge's expression. He was listening carefully, taking notes. Then I stood. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Judge Brennan looked at me. "Ms. Sullivan, you have counsel." "I know," I said, "but I need to say this directly. I visited my grandfather every week because I loved him, not because I wanted his money. I never asked him for a single dollar. My parents, on the other hand, called him twice in 5 years, both times asking for money." The courtroom was silent. "The truth is in the records, Your Honor," I said quietly, "not in their accusations." Judge Brennan studied me for a long moment. Then he turned to Harris. "Mr. Harris, do you have additional evidence beyond this disputed letter?" Harris hesitated. "We're still gathering." "You filed this lawsuit without sufficient evidence?" the judge asked, his tone sharp. The momentum was shifting. I could feel it. "Before I continue, I want to say thank you for watching. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt underestimated or had to fight for what's rightfully yours, Please hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below. Let me know. Have you ever had to stand up to family in a public setting? How did you handle it? Your stories mean so much to me, and I read every single one. Okay, let's get back to what happened next in that courtroom, because things were about to get even more intense. That's when my mother stood up again. Your Honor, please, she said, her voice rising. My daughter has always been ungrateful. She abandoned this family when she was 17. She turned her back on us. Judge Brennan's expression hardened. Mrs. Sullivan, I've asked you to remain seated. But she wasn't done. She turned to face me directly, her eyes blazing. You were never good enough for this family, Taylor, you know that. You've always been a disappointment. And now you're trying to steal what doesn't belong to you. The words hit like a slap. Not because they hurt. I'd heard variations of them my entire life. But because she was saying them here, in front of everyone. Colleagues, reporters, strangers. She wanted to humiliate me publicly. The courtroom was dead silent. I could feel every eye on me, waiting to see if I'd break. I stood slowly and looked at my mother. My voice came out steady. I didn't abandon anyone, I said. I left because I was never wanted. There's a difference. My mother's face flushed red. Judge Brennan slammed his gavel. That's enough. Mrs. Sullivan, sit down immediately, or I will hold you in contempt of court. My father grabbed her arm and pulled her back into her seat. She was shaking with rage. The judge turned to the entire courtroom. Let me be clear. This is a court of law, not a family therapy session. We will proceed based on evidence and legal arguments. Personal attacks have no place here. He looked at me, and something in his expression softened just slightly. Ms. Sullivan, you may be seated. I sat down, my heart pounding. Jennifer leaned over and whispered, You handled that perfectly. But I could still feel my mother's hatred radiating across the room. The judge wasn't done, though. He turned to Harris with a look that made the attorney shift uncomfortably. Jennifer stood again, and I could see the confidence in her posture. This was the moment we'd been preparing for. Your Honor, she said, we have evidence that conclusively demonstrates Mr. William Sullivan's mental capacity and his intentions. Harris looked up sharply. What evidence? A video recording, Jennifer replied, made by Mr. Sullivan 1 year before his death in the presence of his attorney, Robert Smith. In it, Mr. Sullivan explains his decision in his own words. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Brennan raised his hand for silence. A video recording? He asked. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Sullivan wanted to ensure there would be no question about his wishes or his state of mind. Harris was on his feet. Objection. This video could have been manipulated. Deepfakes are... We're prepared to provide full forensic analysis, Jennifer interrupted. The video includes metadata, timestamps, and was recorded in the presence of a licensed attorney who will testify to its authenticity. Judge Brennan considered this. When was this video made? March 15th of last year, Jennifer said, 14 months before Mr. Sullivan's death. His medical records from that same week show he was in excellent cognitive health. I watched my parents' faces. My father's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. My mother had gone pale. I'll allow it, Judge Brennan said, but I want that forensic analysis submitted before we view it. I want independent verification that this recording is authentic and unaltered. We can provide that within 24 hours, Your Honor, Jennifer said. Then we'll reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. The judge looked at both tables. I suggest both parties use this time to consider whether this case should proceed. He was giving my parents an out, a chance to drop the lawsuit before they were humiliated, but I knew they wouldn't take it. That evening, my phone rang. I was in my apartment reviewing documents with Jennifer when I saw my father's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Jennifer nodded. Put it on speaker, I answered. Hello. Taylor! My father's voice was clipped, businesslike. We need to talk. We talked in court, I said. Not there, privately. This has gone too far. I exchanged a glance with Jennifer. What do you want? To settle this, he said. Look, Your mother was emotional today. She didn't mean those things, but we can work this out. Drop the video, we'll drop the lawsuit. We split the estate 50-50. 50-50, after everything. No, I said. Taylor, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, I said. The will is legal. Grandfather made his choice. I'm not negotiating. My mother's voice came through in the background. Let me talk to her. There was a rustling sound, then my mother's voice, sharp and cold. You're making a mistake, Taylor. If you go through with this, we'll destroy you. Everyone will know what kind of person you are. They already tried that, I said. It didn't work. We have more, she hissed. Things you don't want coming out. Jennifer mouthed, bluffing. If you have evidence, present it in court, I said. Otherwise, stop threatening me. You ungrateful, I hung up, my hands were shaking. Jennifer put a hand on my shoulder. They're panicking, she said. That video scares them. They know it's over. Then why do I feel like this is just beginning? I asked. Because it is, Jennifer said quietly. Tomorrow, when that video plays, everything changes. They know it, you know it. And they're going to fight dirty until the very end. I looked at my phone, at my father's name still on the screen. Let them, I said. I'm ready. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my living room with Jennifer, going over every possible scenario. The forensic analysis had come back clean. The video was authentic, unaltered, and properly documented. We had medical records, witness testimony, and a paper trail that supported every claim we'd made. This should be straightforward, Jennifer said, reviewing her notes. The video ends their case. Should be, I repeated. But they'll try something. You know they will, she nodded. They'll attack your character, try to paint you as manipulative, calculating. Be ready for that. I've been ready my whole life, I said. Jennifer looked at me carefully. Are you sure you want to be in the courtroom when we play the video? You could wait outside. I can handle it. I shook my head. No, I need to be there. I need to see their faces when they hear what grandfather really thought of them. She didn't argue. At 6 a.m., I showered and dressed in my most professional suit. Charcoal gray, tailored, the one I wore for closing arguments. I wanted to look like the attorney I was, not the victim they were trying to make me. Jennifer met me at the courthouse steps. The reporters were back, more of them this time. Word had spread about the video. Ms. Sullivan, what's on the recording? Someone shouted. Will you settle with your parents? Another asked. I kept walking. Inside the courtroom, my parents were already seated. My mother's face was set in a hard mask. My father stared straight ahead, refusing to look at me. Judge Brennan entered, and we all rose. We're here to review the video evidence, he said. Ms. Morrison, are you ready to proceed? Jennifer stood. Yes, Your Honor. I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment everything changed. Your Honor, Jennifer said, we'd like to play the video testimony of William Sullivan. The courtroom was more crowded than the day before. I recognized more faces now, partners from my firm, journalists I'd seen on the news, even a few law school classmates. The gallery was packed, people standing along the back wall. This wasn't just a probate dispute anymore. It had become a spectacle. Judge Brennan surveyed the room with a stern expression. I want to remind everyone present that this is a court of law. There will be no outbursts, no commentary, and no recordings of any kind. Bailiff, please ensure all devices are silenced. The bailiff walked through the gallery, checking phones. My parents sat rigid at their table. My mother's hands were clasped so tightly, her knuckles had gone white. My father kept glancing at the screen that had been set up at the front of the courtroom. Jennifer had everything ready. Laptop connected, audio tested, the forensic report submitted and reviewed. Judge Brennan had spent the morning examining the authentication documents. Ms. Morrison, the judge said, I've reviewed your forensic analysis. The video appears to be authentic. You may proceed. Jennifer nodded and stood. Thank you, Your Honor. Before we begin, I want to note for the record that this video was recorded on March 15th of last year in the office of Attorney Robert Smith. Mr. Sullivan was 84 years old at the time and, according to his medical records, in full cognitive health. She gestured to the screen. Your Honor, members of the court, I present the testimony of William Sullivan, recorded in his own words. The lights dimmed slightly, the screen flickered to life, and there he was. My grandfather, sitting in a leather chair wearing his favorite cardigan, looking directly at the camera with clear, focused eyes. The courtroom went completely silent. Even my mother stopped fidgeting. My grandfather's voice filled the room, strong and steady despite his age. My name is William Sullivan. I'm making this video to explain my decision. The video hadn't even finished when Harris was on his feet. Your Honor, I need to object. Sit down, Mr. Harris, Judge Brennan said without taking his eyes off the screen. You'll have your opportunity. Harris sat, but I could see his mind working, scrambling for a counter-strategy. When the video ended, the courtroom remained silent for a long moment. Several people in the gallery were wiping their eyes. One of my colleagues nodded at me with something like respect. Judge Brennan turned to Harris. Your response, counselor? Harris stood, straightening his tie. He was good, I had to give him that. Even cornered, he looked composed. Your Honor, while the video is compelling, it doesn't change the fundamental issue. My clients have evidence that Ms. Sullivan systematically isolated her grandfather from his family. He walked to his table and pulled out a stack of papers. These are text messages between Ms. Sullivan and her grandfather. In them, she repeatedly discourages him from seeing his son. She tells him that Richard and Margaret only want his money. He handed copies to the judge and to Jennifer. I leaned forward to read them. My stomach dropped. They were real messages, but they'd been edited. Key context had been removed. Harris continued. This is elder abuse, Your Honor. She poisoned the relationship between father and son, then swooped in to claim the inheritance. My mother stood up again, despite her attorney's hand on her arm. She convinced him we didn't love him, my mother said, her voice breaking with manufactured emotion. That's manipulation. That's exactly what this video doesn't show, how she got inside his head. The courtroom murmured. Some people were nodding. The narrative was shifting again, and I could feel it. Judge Brennan held up his hand. Mrs. Sullivan, I've warned you about speaking out of turn. But the damage was done. Doubt had been planted. Jennifer was already pulling up her laptop. Your Honor, those messages are taken completely out of context, she said. We have the full conversation records, and they tell a very different story. She connected her laptop to the courtroom display. The messages appeared on the screen, but this time they were complete. The first exchange showed my grandfather texting me. Your father called again, asked for $50,000 for Marcus's business, third time this year. My response, you don't have to give it to him if you don't want to. His reply, I know, but he gets angry when I say no, says I'm being selfish. My message, that's not fair to you. You've already helped them so much. Jennifer highlighted the next part, the part Harris had left out. See here, Your Honor? Ms. Sullivan isn't telling her grandfather to avoid his son. She's supporting him in setting boundaries when he's being financially exploited. She scrolled to another conversation. My grandfather. Margaret said I'm wasting money on charity cases instead of helping family. She means the scholarship fund I started. Me. Your money, your choice. You've earned the right to spend it however you want. Him. Thank you for understanding, Taylor. You're the only one who doesn't make me feel guilty. Jennifer turned to the judge. The full context shows that Ms. Sullivan was protecting her grandfather from financial manipulation, not isolating him from his family. I stood. Your Honor, I never told my grandfather to cut off my parents. I told him he had the right to say no. There's a difference. Judge Brennan was reading through the messages carefully, comparing them to the edited versions Harris had submitted. Mr. Harris, he said slowly, did you knowingly submit incomplete evidence to this court? Harris's face went pale. Your Honor, we received these messages from... That's not what I asked. The room held its breath. That's when my mother snapped. She shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is ridiculous. She's twisting everything." "Mrs. Sullivan," Judge Brennan began. "No!" My mother's voice echoed through the courtroom. "I'm not going to sit here and watch her lie about us. She doesn't deserve that money. She's nothing. She's always been nothing." The entire courtroom froze. "She was a mistake," my mother continued, her face flushed with rage. "We never wanted her. We tried to make something of her, but she threw it all away, and now she thinks she can take what belongs to our family?" "Mrs. Sullivan, sit down immediately," Judge Brennan said, his voice sharp as a whip. "She's a liar and a manipulator, and everyone in this room needs to know." "Bailiff," the judge said. The bailiff moved toward my mother. My father grabbed her arm, trying to pull her back into her seat, but she yanked away from him. "You're all being fooled," she shouted at the gallery. "She's not the victim here. We are. She stole our father from us." "Mrs. Sullivan, if you don't sit down right now, I will hold you in contempt and have you removed from this courtroom." My mother finally stopped, breathing hard, her eyes wild. She looked around the courtroom and seemed to realize what she'd just done. Slowly, she sank back into her chair. The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Brennan stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Harris. "Mr. Harris, I suggest you counsel your client on courtroom decorum." Harris nodded, looking shaken. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge turned to Jennifer. "Ms. Morrison, do you have additional evidence to present?" Jennifer glanced at me. I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. "We'd like to call our medical expert to testify about Mr. Sullivan's cognitive capacity." But Judge Brennan held up his hand. "Before we proceed with expert testimony, I'd like to replay a portion of Mr. Sullivan's video. There was a section I want the court to hear again." Jennifer pulled up the video and fast-forwarded to a specific timestamp. My grandfather's face reappeared on the screen. This time he was leaning forward slightly, his expression more serious. "I want to address something directly," he said on the recording. "I know my son and daughter-in-law may challenge this will. They'll say I was confused or manipulated, so let me be absolutely clear." He looked straight at the camera. "I am 84 years old. I have all my faculties. My doctor, Dr. Ellen Martinez, examined me last week and confirmed I'm in sound mental health. I'm making this decision with full awareness and intention." He paused, and I could see emotion flickering across his face. "My son, Richard, has called me 4 times in the past 2 years. Each time he asked for money. My daughter-in-law, Margaret, has visited me twice in 5 years. Both times she stayed less than an hour." His voice grew stronger. "Taylor visits me every Tuesday. She brings me books. She tells me about her cases. She asks about my day. She's never asked me for a single dollar, not once." I felt tears prickling at my eyes. "I'm leaving everything to Taylor because she's the only person in this family who loved me for who I am, not what I have. She deserves this inheritance. She earned it through years of genuine care and love." He leaned back in his chair. "If anyone challenges this will, know that I made this decision with a clear mind and a full heart. This is my final word on the matter." The video ended. The courtroom was completely silent. I looked at the gallery and saw several people wiping their eyes. One woman was openly crying. I looked at my parents. My mother's face was ashen. My father was staring at the floor. Jennifer stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to call Dr. Ellen Martinez to the stand." A woman in her 50s entered the courtroom. She was petite, professional, with graying hair pulled back in a bun. She took the oath and sat in the witness box. "Dr. Martinez," Jennifer began, "what is your relationship to William Sullivan?" "I was his primary care physician for 23 years, she replied. "And did you examine Mr. Sullivan in March of last year, around the time he made the video we just watched?" "Yes, I performed a comprehensive evaluation specifically at his request." Jennifer pulled up a medical report on the screen. "Can you describe your findings?" Dr. Martinez adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Sullivan was in excellent cognitive health for his age. I administered the mini mental state examination, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, and several other standard tests. He scored in the normal range on all of them. Was there any indication of dementia, confusion, or diminished capacity? None whatsoever. He was sharp, articulate, and fully aware of his circumstances. Jennifer nodded. Did he explain why he wanted this evaluation? Yes. He told me he was updating his will and wanted documentation that he was of sound mind. He said, and I quote, "I don't want anyone claiming I didn't know what I was doing." The courtroom murmured. Judge Brennan leaned forward. Dr. Martinez, in your professional opinion, was William Sullivan capable of making informed decisions about his estate in March of last year? Absolutely, she said without hesitation. He knew exactly what he was doing. The judge turned to Harris. Mr. Harris, do you have any evidence that contradicts Dr. Martinez's testimony? Harris stood slowly. He looked at my parents, then back at the judge. No, Your Honor, he said quietly. Do you have any additional witnesses or evidence to present? No, Your Honor. Judge Brennan leaned back in his chair. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. I want to pause here for a moment. If you're still with me, thank you. This part of the story was the hardest to relive, but also the most important. If you've ever had to prove your worth to people who should have loved you unconditionally, I see you. Please leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Hit that button so you don't miss what happens next. Because the judge's decision, it changed everything. Judge Brennan looked at my parents for a long moment, then he looked at me. I've presided over probate disputes for 15 years, he said. I've seen families torn apart by greed, by misunderstanding, by genuine disagreement over a loved one's wishes. But this case is different. He picked up the medical report. The evidence here is overwhelming. Mr. William Sullivan was of sound mind. He made his intentions clear, both in writing and on video. He took extraordinary steps to document his decision because he knew it would be challenged. He turned to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan, I understand that losing a parent is difficult. I understand that grief can make us act in ways we might not otherwise, but the evidence in this case is unambiguous. My mother's hands were shaking. Your father left his estate to Ms. Taylor Sullivan because she earned his trust and love through consistent, genuine care over many years. The will is valid. The video testimony is clear. The medical evidence is conclusive. He looked at me, and something in his expression softened. Ms. Sullivan, I've known you as a colleague and as a professional. It's clear to me and to this court that you earned your grandfather's trust honestly. You didn't manipulate him. You loved him. He picked up his gavel. The will of William Sullivan stands as written. The plaintiff's challenge is dismissed. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. The courtroom erupted. People in the gallery started clapping. My colleagues stood up. I heard someone say, "Finally, Justice." Jennifer grabbed my hand and squeezed it. I looked at my parents. My father had his head in his hands. My mother was staring at the judge with an expression of pure disbelief, but Judge Brennan wasn't finished. Furthermore, he said, raising his voice over the noise, I'm ordering Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan to pay Ms. Sullivan's legal fees in the amount of $45,000 for bringing a frivolous lawsuit. The courtroom went silent again. Judge Brennan continued, his voice stern. I want to be clear about why I'm imposing this sanction. This lawsuit was filed with insufficient evidence. The plaintiff's attorney submitted edited messages that misrepresented the truth. And Mrs. Sullivan's behavior in this courtroom has been contemptuous. My mother flinched. This court will not tolerate baseless accusations against good people, he said. Ms. Sullivan's reputation has been damaged by this lawsuit and by the media coverage surrounding it. She deserves compensation for that harm. He looked directly at my parents. Additionally, I'm issuing a formal order. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan are prohibited from contacting Ms. Taylor Sullivan in any way, by phone, email, text message, social media, or in person. If they violate this order, I will issue a restraining order and hold them in contempt. My father's face had gone gray. Do you understand? Judge Brennan asked. Yes, Your Honor, my father said quietly. My mother said nothing. She was staring at her hands. Harris stood. Your Honor, my clients would like to. Your clients have said enough, the judge interrupted. This case is closed. We're adjourned. The gavel came down one final time. People started filing out of the courtroom. Reporters rushed toward the doors, already typing on their phones. My colleagues came up to congratulate me, shaking my hand, patting my shoulder, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, feeling the weight of the past few weeks finally lift. Jennifer leaned over. You did it. It's over. I looked across the courtroom. My parents were gathering their things. My mother's hands were shaking so badly she dropped her purse. My father picked it up without a word. Harris was talking to them in low, urgent tones, probably explaining what had just happened and what it meant for them. They didn't look at me, not once, and somehow that felt like the final victory. I stepped out of the courtroom into the hallway, and that's when I saw her. My mother was standing by the elevator, alone. My father and Harris had gone ahead, probably to discuss next steps. She was just standing there, staring at the wall. For a moment, I considered walking past her, ignoring her the way she'd ignored me for so many years. But something made me stop. Mom, I said. She turned. Her face was blotchy from crying, her carefully applied makeup smeared. She looked older than I'd ever seen her. What? She said, her voice hoarse. I'm sorry it came to this, I said, and I meant it. Not because I regretted fighting for what was mine, but because I was sorry we were a family that had to end up in court. She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You're sorry? You just took everything from us. I didn't take anything, I said quietly. Grandfather gave it to me. There's a difference. You think you've won? She asked, stepping closer. You think this is over? You've lost your family, Taylor. You have no one now. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized something. She actually believed that. She thought family was about blood and obligation and control. I never had a family, I said. I had people who wanted grandfather's money. That's not the same thing. We're still your parents, she said, but her voice wavered. No, I said. You're the people who gave birth to me. But you were never my parents. Parents show up. They support you. They love you even when you disappoint them. You did none of that. Her face crumpled. For a second, I thought she might apologize, might finally say something real. Instead, she said, We'll never forgive you for this. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I replied. I'm asking you to leave me alone. I walked away. I didn't look back. That was the last time I spoke to them. The next morning, I met with Jennifer at her office. I want to make sure they can't come back, I said. I want this finished. Jennifer nodded. The judge's order prohibits contact, but we can file for a formal restraining order if you want additional protection. Do it, I said. She pulled out paperwork. We'll also make sure the will is properly executed. All assets transferred, all accounts closed and reopened in your name. They won't be able to contest anything again. How long will that take? A few weeks? Maybe a month? She looked at me carefully. How are you doing? Really? I thought about it. I don't know. I feel relieved, but also sad. Does that make sense? Completely, she said. You won, Taylor. But winning doesn't always feel the way you expect it to. Over the next few days, I took steps to protect myself. I changed my phone number. I blocked my parents on every social media platform. I informed my building's security that they were not to be allowed up to my apartment under any circumstances. I wasn't hiding. I was protecting my peace. Jennifer filed the restraining order. It was granted without opposition. My parents didn't even show up to the hearing. The firm's managing partner called me into his office. I expected a lecture about the media attention. Instead, he said, I'm proud of you. You handled that with more grace than most people could have managed. Thank you, I said. Take some time off if you need it, he offered. I shook my head. I'd rather work. I need the normalcy. He smiled. That's what I thought you'd say. That evening, I sat in my apartment, my safe, quiet apartment, and realized something. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for my parents' approval. I wasn't hoping they'd finally see my worth. I was free. The media reaction was swift and overwhelming. The day after the trial, articles started appearing everywhere. The headlines had changed. Attorney wins inheritance battle against greedy parents. Grandfather's video testimony exposes family's true nature. Judge awards legal fees to daughter after baseless lawsuit. One article in the Boston Globe was particularly detailed. It included quotes from people who'd been in the courtroom, describing my mother's outburst and my grandfather's video. The reporter had done their homework. They'd found my law school professors, former colleagues, even my grandfather's neighbors. Everyone painted the same picture. I was hardworking, principled, and genuinely devoted to my grandfather. My parents were opportunistic and cruel. The comments section was different this time. Instead of calling me a gold digger, people were supportive. Good for her. Family doesn't mean you have to tolerate abuse. That video made me cry. Her grandfather really loved her. I hope she uses that money to live her best life. My phone started buzzing with messages. Colleagues from the firm congratulated me. Old law school friends reached out. Even people I hadn't spoken to in years sent notes of support. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Sarah, someone I'd never met. I saw your story on the news. I'm in a similar situation with my own family. Watching you stand up for yourself gave me the courage to set boundaries with my parents. Thank you for being brave enough to fight. I read that message 3 times. Jennifer forwarded me an email from a journalist asking if I'd be willing to do an interview. You could tell your side of the story, she said. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to scream from the rooftops about what my parents had done. But another part of me, the part that was finally at peace, knew I didn't need to. No, I told Jennifer. The court record speaks for itself. I'm done explaining myself. I didn't seek out information about my parents after the trial, but news reached me anyway. A former colleague mentioned that my father's real estate company had lost 2 major clients. Both cited concerns about character in their termination letters. In Boston's tight-knit business community, reputation was everything. The trial had damaged his. My mother's social circle, the same women she'd spent decades impressing, started distancing themselves. One of my grandfather's neighbors told me she'd seen my mother at a charity gala, standing alone by the bar while her former friends clustered on the other side of the room. It was sad, the neighbor said. But honestly, Taylor, people are talking. What she said about you in court, that was cruel. Nobody wants to be associated with that. I didn't feel happy hearing this. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt empty. A few weeks later, I ran into an old family friend at a coffee shop. She'd known my parents for 30 years. I'm sorry about what happened, she said carefully. Your grandfather was a good man. He made the right choice. Thank you, I said. She hesitated, then added, Your parents are struggling, financially and socially. They're talking about selling the house. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know. I hope they find peace, I said. And I meant it. Not because I forgave them, but because I didn't want to carry their pain anymore. The friend looked surprised. That's very gracious of you. It's not grace, I said. It's self-preservation. Hating them would hurt me more than it would hurt them. She nodded slowly. Your grandfather would be proud of the person you've become. That made me smile. Because it was true. And unlike my parents' approval, his mattered. 3 months after the trial, I made a decision about the inheritance. I didn't need $12 million. I had a good job, a comfortable life. The money was more than I could ever spend on myself. But I knew exactly what my grandfather would have wanted me to do with it. I called a meeting with my financial advisor and Jennifer. I want to set up a scholarship fund, I said. for law students from low-income backgrounds. Jennifer smiled. Your grandfather would love that. I want to call it the William Sullivan Scholarship Fund, I continued. I'll endow it with $2 million. That should provide full scholarships for at least 4 students every year. My advisor nodded. That's very generous. It's what he would have done, I said. We established the fund through my grandfather's alma mater. The first scholarships would be awarded the following fall. I wrote the criteria myself. Students who'd overcome significant obstacles, who worked multiple jobs, who understood what it meant to fight for their education. Students like I'd been. I also bought a house. Nothing extravagant, just a small Victorian in a quiet neighborhood near the firm. It had a garden, a porch, and enough space for the life I wanted to build. The rest of the money I invested conservatively. I didn't want to be flashy. I didn't want people to treat me differently because of my grandfather's wealth. I wanted to honor his memory by living the way he'd taught me, with integrity, generosity, and purpose. The day the scholarship fund was announced, I received an email from the university. They'd already gotten 50 applications, and the deadline was still 2 months away. One application included a note. My family told me I'd never make it to law school. This scholarship makes me believe I can. I read that note and cried. Because that's exactly what my grandfather had done for me, made me believe I could. 6 months after the trial, I was finally living the life I'd always wanted. I woke up in my own house, my house, paid for with money my grandfather had left me because he loved me. I made coffee in a kitchen with morning light streaming through the windows. I walked to work through a neighborhood where people smiled and said hello. I didn't hear from my parents, not once. The restraining order was still in effect, but I didn't think I'd need it. They'd moved on, and so had I. At work, things had shifted. The partners treated me with a new kind of respect, not because of the money, but because I'd proven I could handle pressure with grace. I got assigned bigger cases, more responsibility. One afternoon, Jennifer stopped by my office. How are you doing? Really? I'm good, I said, and I meant it. I don't think about them anymore, not the way I used to. That's growth, she said. I've learned something, I told her. Family isn't always blood. It's the people who show up for you, the people who see your worth even when you can't see it yourself, she smiled. Your grandfather knew that. I spent my weekends differently now. I volunteered at a legal aid clinic, helping people who couldn't afford attorneys. I hosted dinners for friends, real friends, people who knew me and liked me for who I was. I even started dating someone, a kind, thoughtful professor I'd met at a charity event. He didn't care about my inheritance. He cared that I laughed at his terrible jokes and that I was passionate about my work. One evening, sitting on my porch with a glass of wine, I realized something. I was happy, genuinely, deeply happy. Not because I'd won in court, not because I had money, but because I was finally free to be myself. Looking back, I've learned something important about boundaries. For years, I thought setting boundaries meant being cruel. I thought it meant cutting people off without explanation, building walls so high that no one could reach me. But I was wrong. Boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about protecting who you are. They're about saying, I deserve respect, and if you can't give me that, then I need distance. My parents never respected me. They saw me as less than, as a disappointment, as someone who existed to serve their needs. And for years I accepted that. I kept hoping they'd change. I kept trying to earn their love. But you can't earn something that should be freely given. My grandfather taught me that. He loved me without conditions, without expectations. He saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself. And in doing so, he showed me what real love looks like. So when my parents sued me, when they tried to take what he'd left me, I didn't just fight for the money. I fought for the principle. I fought for the idea that love shouldn't be transactional, that family shouldn't be conditional, that I deserved better. And I won. But the real victory wasn't the court decision. It was the moment I stopped waiting for their approval, the moment I realized I didn't need them to validate my worth. If you're reading this and you're in a similar situation, if you have family members who treat you like you're less than you are, I want you to know something. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. You don't owe anyone your emotional energy if they're only going to use it against you. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's self-respect. And you deserve that. We all do. My grandfather believed in me when no one else did. Now I believe in myself. That's the inheritance he really left me. So what would I say to my parents if I saw them today? Honestly? Nothing. I've already said everything I needed to say in that courtroom. I defended myself. I proved my worth. I honored my grandfather's memory. The rest is up to them. I'm not waiting for an apology. I'm not waiting for them to suddenly realize they were wrong. I'm not holding my breath for a tearful reconciliation where they admit they should have loved me better. Because here's what I've learned. Closure doesn't come from other people. It comes from within. I've created my own closure. I've built a life I'm proud of. I have meaningful work, genuine friendships, and a sense of peace I never thought I'd find. My grandfather's inheritance gave me financial security, yes. But more than that, it gave me validation. It proved that I was seen, that I was valued, that I mattered. And that's something my parents can never take away. If you're watching this and you're in a similar situation, whether it's family, friends, or anyone else who makes you feel less than you are, I want you to hear this. You deserve respect, you deserve peace, and you have every right to fight for it. Don't let anyone convince you that setting boundaries makes you the bad guy. Don't let anyone guilt you into accepting treatment you don't deserve. Stand up for yourself. Use the tools available to you, legal systems, support networks, your own inner strength, and know that you're not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you find the courage to set your own boundaries. You're not just fighting for money or principle, you're fighting for your right to be treated with dignity. And that's a fight worth winning. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. It helps more than you know. I also want to ask, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought in court, or would you have walked away? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories like this, about standing up for yourself, setting boundaries, and finding justice, check out the videos I'm linking in the description. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself and remember, you deserve respect.